I heard you're making your own paint colors, so came as soon as I could.
Why?
Well, everybody knows I'm the creative one in the team, so I'm gonna come up with the paint names.
We aren't a team.
Hey, remember that time I dropped that cinder block on my foot and my big toenail got real purple and then it fell off? Well, this looks like that, so we'll call it Dead Toenail. This one here, it kind of looks like that funny colored tooth that was different than all the other ones on that girl I was seeing a while back, so we'll call this one the Distractor. You know, my favorite movie of all time is obviously Forrest Gump, and this one just kind of reminds me of the color I would envision Tom Hanks' buttocks to be, so we'll just call this one Buttocks. I mean, this just looks like poop, so yeah, that one just writes itself, I guess.
Today is an exciting day, hobby friends. After a year of formulating and testing and then finally producing, I get to show them to you. My good friend Vincey V and I have been working with Jason from Monument Hobbies, the creator of Pro Acryl paints, to come up with the colors that we find ourselves always needing to mix ourselves, or just colors we wish existed in the Pro Acryl range. And now that the paints are exactly the way we want them and the final bottles are in our hands, it's time to show them off and why I chose these colors while I paint up a little accursed cultist here. Vince and I each have a 6 paint set, but if I'm being honest with you, we fought a little bit about who got to create which colors because a lot of them we both use and we love them so much, so we ended up working together on this. All right, to start off, we are going to focus on actually one of Vince's colors here. What am I doing? I thought I'm supposed to be convincing you to get my colors, but whatever. And I'm going to mix in a little bit of my own dark magenta with it, but let's focus on the beige red for now. This color is just an amazing starting point for so many different kinds of skin tones. Many of those paints out there are way too pink or too orange to make a skin tone, and they just look off from the very beginning. But not this one. It's nice and subtle, and you can mix in a little bit of whatever you wanted to make it exactly what you need. In this situation, I'm mixing in a little bit of my dark magenta to add a little bit of richness and more warmth. And we're going to push that later when we discuss why I love using magenta whenever I can. And because our cultist friend here appears to be going through a midlife tentacle crisis, I'm going to take this opportunity to wet blend the weird tentacle colors to the regular skin tone. For this, I'll mix 2 colors from my set, red gray and dark plum. Red gray is a color that has so many stinking uses. So often grays in mini painting are either completely neutral so we can use them for like rocks or concrete, or they're just on the cold spectrum with a bit of blue or green added to them. But when you have a gray that's got a bit of a nice mild warm tone to it, you suddenly have access to a color that looks amazing for undead and unnatural flesh, as well as great for things like highlighting wood, dark armor, or even great on animal fur. I often find myself using this color to highlight up darker colors. Like if you're doing like a really dark, moody blue armor, you could add in some of this stuff and it keeps it nice and balanced with that little bit of warmth while not going too over the top for your final highlights. And because Pro Acryl paints have a fairly long working time, wet blending the base colors together and adding more depth to these tentacles by pushing them darker with more dark plum is pretty fast and painless. As we go back to his human skin tone, I'm going to add some depth and some shadows and warmth in those with dark magenta. And we need to talk about this color. First things first, the name dark magenta isn't exactly accurate. This is a single pigment magenta. That's right, pure magenta. And the magenta pigment on its own is actually quite transparent. So we had to do a lot of work to make this work at least somewhat opaque in its coverage. It's extremely powerful and vibrant. It thins down super smoothly, and it's great for glazing in a beautiful warm tone on so many things. Like our flesh here, maybe you want to add a warm source lighting, it's perfect for that. It's even great for vibrant, fantastical monster scales and hides. I just love having access to a vibrant, pure pigment paint right out of the bottle. Also, it just mixes so well and it makes a big impact so your minis grab your eye at a distance. Once we've created those shadows and warmth on the skin with the dark magenta, we're going to start working up our highlights, and I'm going to bring out another one of my colors called Dark Warm Flesh. And don't let the name fool you, it's actually not very dark at all, nor is it only useful for a flesh tone, but it is very warm. So while the 3 words in the name don't fit Meatloaf's criteria, I will say that 1 out of 3 ain't bad. You're probably wondering why it's called Dark Warm Flesh if that's not the accurate name for it. Well, there is an existing naming convention with Pro Acryl paints, which by and large is amazing. It's pretty easy to follow. You know what the color is just by the name. It doesn't have silly made up words or colors that are just meant to be funny. But that also means that sometimes colors like these need to fit in. Where would they go with other paints? And the names need to show that as well. So you're just going to have to stick with me as we get through all the uses beyond just what we think it's used for by the name on the bottle. This is the kind of color that I like to use for highlighting just about anything when I want to keep that warm, vibrant look to it. Anytime we just highlight with white, we're blowing out our base color. It loses all its oomph. But if we start to highlight with something like a pure yellow, our base color just starts to read more and more like yellow. But with this color, we add enough unique color depth while still not overpowering the base tone we started with. And you don't have to just use this for skin. You could use it for cloth. You could use it for leaves and foliage. Heck, you could use it to highlight literally anything if you want the model to look like it's standing in sunlight. Now I'm going to go back in and add some color depth to the tentacle regions on our cultist here using the color I'm probably most proud of in this entire set, Dark Plum. This is a color I've had to mix myself for years up until now, and I never remembered exactly what colors I used and what the ratios were because I'm too lazy to write down recipes, and now I guess that laziness is rewarded because I don't have to ever again. Not only is this my favorite color for a rich, realistic dark violet, but it's also perfect for skin shadows and really any shadows when you want to create that warm feeling without just adding black and making the model look flat and boring. Today's video is brought to us by Space Wolf, an artist that really knows his way around some wood. They smell so good. He specializes in woodworking, illustration, laser engraving, and hand painting each work of art. Each piece is a limited run and is signed, branded, and numbered. What that means is when something sells out, it's gone forever, as he destroys the original illustration in true metalhead fashion. So you know that your Space Wolf original is truly unique. He also carries these amazing painting kits, and inside you've got everything you need to paint the amazing wood carving that's included. Except this one's upside down. It's a lot more dramatic if I say that's included. Look at these cute little baby paint bottles you get. I mean, that's priceless right there. I just love having these amazing works of art hanging up in my painting room. So be sure to check out Space Wolf on his Instagram to see what new crazy designs he's working on, and then visit his website, spacewolfltd.com, to see everything he's got in stock before it's gone forever. And as a special bonus, use coupon code NINJON at checkout for 10% off your order. So a big thank you to Space Wolf for sponsoring this video and sharing his amazing artwork and talent with all of us at the Ninjon family. You know, kind of realizing now that all 6 of the colors in my range are warm colors. And I guess that maybe says something about me as a painter and the kinds of colors I gravitate towards. But I'm not going to think too hard about what it says about me as a person. Whether it's creating an eerie dark atmosphere of a damp dungeon or an alien planet, or even creating unique shadows on blue or green armor, this color gets used in just about every model I paint. Continuing the work on these tentacles, I'm going to come back in with my pure red gray to build up this nice desaturated, kind of gross looking highlights there. And I'm hoping you're starting to maybe get a little bit of a feel for why I like these colors so much. They're both flexible in what colors that they blend together with and what they work with within a model's paint composition scheme, but they also have enough of a unique look to them that the model just doesn't end up looking super bland. I look at it this way. If I can have a handful of paints that are my go-tos and I use often because of their flexibility, that means I get to save a bunch of money on buying a whole bunch of different paints that all have a single use. Also, it saves me a bunch of time at the painting desk. I know how these paints work. I know how they're flexible, and I know how they'll make a highlight or a shadow look, so I don't need to overthink and I can just spend my time painting. Oh, check this out. This is a great example of the magenta in action. Because it thins down so well, but it still has a distinct pop to it, using a heavy glaze of it can really add more depth and interest like we're doing with the tentacles here. I need to talk to you about brown for a minute. Now, if you were a paint manufacturer for miniature paints, you'd think you'd want a nice, versatile paint that would be perfect for leathers, woods, and maybe a great starting point for non-metallic gold, right? Wrong. You wouldn't do that, apparently, because nobody makes that kind of paint. Well, one company gets pretty darn close, but their paints are in these stupid little pots and they're way overpriced, so we're going to forget about that one. Our warm brown here is rich with a touch of red and orange to it without being too dark to use as a flexible midtone. It does so many different brown things so well. If you told me I had to use this paint for every mini for the rest of my life, I'd probably be fine with that. So often browns are too desaturated or too red or too dark. This one is great because it can easily be mixed into any of those, but it's perfect right out of the bottle for so many things, and I've found that mixing this exact color on my own is a giant pain in the butt. I kind of have this weird feeling right now that this video is starting to feel a bit like an infomercial for these paints and trying to get you to buy them, and I do make a little bit of money for every bottle that's sold, so those of you that support me that way, I really appreciate it. But make no mistake, whether or not you buy them, I will use them all the time now that they're made, so I kind of already won there. But something else I'm trying to communicate here, and maybe I'm doing a bad job of it, is the value of finding paints that just speak to you. Ones that you go back to time and time again because of their flexibility, because they're great right out of the bottle without any mixing. But they also really mix well to make interesting new colors. They can be thinned down and used as glazes to make all sorts of interesting subtle shifts. But you just love them and you go back to them. And while these are those colors for me, they don't have to be those colors for you. You might find all sorts of different colors that speak to you and they act the way you want them to act, and lean into that. It'll help you kind of figure out your own style through color. By developing this familiarity with a favorite paint, it actually teaches you how paints act differently. And you'll gravitate towards certain brands or certain consistencies of paint. It's all a part of your painting journey, and each of those nuggets of information that stick in your head will become second nature. And at that point, that's the point when you stop thinking about how you want a paint to act, and it just does so naturally because you're so used to using it. That feeling is a feeling I want each of you to experience on your painting journey. All right, enough touchy-feely stuff. As we are brightening up this leather, I'm using the color Dark Ivory. And I know this one isn't a real showstopper in terms of name or color, but I assure you, this color is an absolute workhorse. Remember how I said I didn't like highlighting with pure white? Well, this is the color I like to use when I don't want to add a warm or cold color to the highlights, but I still want something that isn't pure white. It's also a great base coat for a ton of really interesting things, maybe a white linen shirt, or white power armor, or dried out wood, or stones, or bleached bone. I think you get the idea. The key is that this color isn't too bright, and it has just a touch of yellow and brown in it, so it's not too flat and boring. And unlike a lot of off-white and bone colors, this one isn't so bright that you feel like you can't go brighter without going to full white. And I like to be careful to almost never go to pure white on a model. And when you're starting with those ivory colors that are so bright, it's really hard to go any brighter, and this one can still read as a warm white without having to worry too much about using pure white. You know, I didn't actually plan on painting this entire model with only the colors in these two sets, but I realized that's what we've done, so we better not break the streak now. Here is dark yellow green from Vince's set, and I gotta say, this is my kind of green. It's sickly, it's perfect for Nurgle and any kind of organic gunk or slime you want to weather on vehicles, as well as being great for moss and shrubbery. It walks that fine line between toddler snot and baby poop that the parents among you can truly appreciate. I love how well it shades down with our warm brown, and I think if you used it with a dark plum in the shadows, it could be an awesome color scheme for Death Guard armor. And to highlight this up, I'm just mixing in some of our dark warm flesh. See how this color doesn't read as flesh. It doesn't read as anything bright and yellow either. It's kind of naturally adding warmth and color depth as the highlights build up. Because our miniature paint flesh tones typically have an interesting mix of yellows, reds, oranges, whites, blacks, sometimes even a little brown to them, they're just not one color, right? They make highlighting with them so much more interesting than just going from dark green to medium green to bright yellow green. I challenge you to not look at the name on the bottle, but to look at every single paint in your paint collection that's a bright one. Look at it as a universal highlight color. And if you start doing that, you may find you'll highlight up in some much more interesting, cool ways than you thought you could do. I found this is a great way to get usage out of those paints in your collection that you basically never use and feel bad that you bought. I have stuff like a bright lime green or maybe a bright peach that I was never going to use on its own. But as I mix them in, building up highlights, they have a great use in the new color that they produce. It's pretty awesome. All right, I got some bad news, ladies and gentlemen. For the first time on this model, I have to break away from the 12 paints here. You see, I've got some metallics to paint and there's no metallics in here. So let's bust out some silvers and get back to it. But don't worry, this is a great excuse to showcase more flexibility with our colors in the sets here. By mixing in a bit of dark red to our warm brown, we've got a perfect dark rust color. Just be sure to thin it down well, about 2 parts water to 1 part paint, and push it into all of the areas where rust would naturally accumulate. Plus, if you go really thin with this, you can even go all over the metals to create this slight patinaed look over the entire silver surface. I often like to have 2 or 3 different buildups in brighter tones of rust, so I'm just gonna take that mix from the dark rust and add in a little bit of our dark warm flesh and bring us up to a nice, more vibrant orange rust for more select areas. And with that, our accursed cultist here is complete. And I think he's a fitting culmination to all the work that went into creating these paints. I did really enjoy working with a close friend Vince and my new friend Jason at Monument Hobbies to create something that I really am proud of and am excited to use in my own paint projects going forward. But mostly I'm just happy that I don't have to mix these damn colors on my own anymore. And as you can probably tell by my vast miniature paint collection, I love trying out new colors and trying out new mixes of colors. And this is where I need your help. Are there certain colors you can't live without? Certain paints that you just always go back to, whether they're from a bottle or you mix them yourself? Let me know down in the comment section below. I think the rest of us can check things out, try out new paints, try out new mixes, and have a little fun with the next mini we paint. And a massive thank you to those of you who do pick up this paint set. It really does mean a lot and it supports the channel so I can keep the lights on here in the studio. If you do paint with them, why don't you tag me over on Instagram so I can see what you did and see how cool the colors turn out for you. And as always, I want to thank my patrons. Because of your support, I can make fun videos like this and set aside time to work on cool projects like bringing my favorite paints to life. If you want to join us over on the Ninjan Dojo and see the fun rewards you get for doing so, check out the link down in the description below. I'm going to see you back here again real soon, and sometime between now and then, make sure you find time in your day to slay the gray.
Front tooth that was different color than all the other tooth on
and the way it turns out seems much more realistic in its final approach. Fuck me.